The preseason is in the books for the Seahawks, and it's on to week one in the 49ers. But first, there's roster cuts coming up. We'll be diving to those later in the show. But what did we learn from Seahawks preseason games this year? We're going to be diving in here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in for this Monday episode. We greatly appreciate your support, whether you're tuning in from Carnation, Washington, or Globe, Arizona. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are now in the 2-week lull between the end of the preseason and week one. I shouldn't necessarily say it's a lull, though, because of all the action that's going on behind the scenes. Rosters getting trimmed from 90 players to 53. There's been a bunch of trades around the league today. Veteran free agents that didn't participate in training camp starting to latch on with teams. So there's plenty of drama going on in terms of roster construction, gearing up for week one. Rob and I will have our 53-man projections, our final ones, coming your way here on this show after we dive into what we learned this preseason about the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. So without further ado, let's get to it now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Seattle wrapping up its 2025 preseason with a 20-7 loss to the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Certainly, like most final preseason games, Rob, that was a tough one to watch in a lot of ways, particularly for the Seahawks, who were only able to put 7 points on the board, had a bunch of turnovers. It was a sloppy game. So let's talk about what we learned from this exhibition season, and we can tie it into this third preseason game as well, because this is obviously the most we got to see Jalen Milroe. And that's what I want to start this conversation with, because there's been plenty of you. Look, we read the comments. We respect everything that our listeners have to say, and maybe we don't necessarily agree all the time, but we read your guys' comments, and we know that a lot of you are not happy with what you saw from Jalen Milroe in this game in Green Bay. But I want to take the foot off of the negative gas pedal right now for just a second and understand that what we are talking about here. We are discussing a QB who, Rob, I know you had a little higher grade on him. I had a 4th-round grade. I did not see Jalen Milroe as a guy that was going to be ready to play significant snaps in the NFL early. That's just the reality. And what we saw on Saturday in Green Bay is a quarterback who is not close to being ready to play, and that's okay, because you don't need him to do anything beyond an occasional sub-package play if you're still going to be doing those kind of things. You don't need him to be ready to play substantial snaps under center yet. You have an ideal situation to be able to develop him. And when I went back and watched the film, I thought there were more positives from Saturday than what there were when I was initially watching. There were certainly some throws that got away from him. The ball security is a big thing. If you want to be playing on sub-packages as a gadget player, you better hold on to the football, or those opportunities are not going to be there for you. But I thought that the personnel around him put him in a really difficult spot to try to evaluate him in this game, especially with the Packers playing a lot of their starters. And we did see a few drives in the fourth quarter where he had some time and he was able to go through his progressions. I saw progress late in this game, and it was more optimism for me coming out of a replay, watching the All-22, than I had watching it live.
Well, I just think that it comes down to expectations. I think that if you understood that the Seahawks were going to be starting their backups, number 2s, number 3s in most cases, against the Green Bay starters at Lambeau Field, then I think that and this is a Packers squad, of course, that is a perennial playoff team. So it's not like the Seahawks were going up against a powder puff football team. I expected the Seahawks to lose, expected it with a 3rd-string quarterback, a rookie who was as raw as Jalen Milroe, for them to struggle, and they did so. That said, to me, one of the absolute positives to take out of all of the preseason, including the loss to the Packers here, is the fact that the Seahawks now have a legitimate running game. They've got the beef and, just as importantly, the belief to be able to actually run the football consistently. It didn't matter who was at the running back position. Jalen Milroe, everybody's going to be critical of some of his airmail passes, as you said, and obviously the lack of ball security is very concerning. But at the same time, you can see the speed, you can see the athletic ability. There were some pinpoint throws in there as well. So again, I mean, this is a project, but as you said, Corbin, I mean, the Seahawks are well positioned to have a project at the quarterback position, because that to me would be one of the other kind of storylines of this entire training camp, in preseason. Obviously, Sam Darnold did not play a lot during the preseason, but we got to see what he could do at training camp. When he did get his opportunities in the preseason, he was spectacular. So again, I think that it's much ado about nothing as far as fretting about the future at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to get caught up in this in the preseason when you're talking about a young quarterback that's got all these tools. And look, we've talked about how great he's looked in a lot of the training camp practices. So, of course, fans are going to have this built-in expectation he's going to go out there and just absolutely dominate. But again, I do think the personnel thing is something we have to consider here. He had third and fourth string offensive linemen playing in front of him against Green Bay's mostly starters on the first drive. That is putting Milroe in a position that's extremely difficult to evaluate. And finally, in the second half, you kind of had even on even, and you started to see things come together a little bit for Jalen Milroe. But the other thing that I want to mention, it kind of goes off what you said with the run game, that what we learned this preseason, John Benton is the dude. That is what I'm going to say right now. John Benton, to me, everyone's going to talk Clint Kubiak, and he has been impressive so far. But I've gotten to watch John Benton and just the way that he handles coaching these guys. And if you're not doing your job, you're going to get yanked out of the lineup. We saw it with Christian Haynes a couple of times. We saw it a couple of times with Mike Jarrell. Like, if you're not doing your job, if you're false start and you're not listening to what we're teaching you, you're not going to be out there. And the guys that are responding to that, it's showing up on the game field, particularly the starters. And we got to see them in the first couple preseason games. To me, to this point, that has been the most stark difference for Seattle's offense, and it's a big part of that identity change, shifting back to getting that run game going. It's all about John Benton and having that seasoned, proven teacher on the offensive line that's coaching these guys up.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think that that is the huge storyline on offense. I mean, obviously a huge difference if this team can run the football after being just putrid and trying to run the football a year ago. I think that it's a nice segue to just to the idea that the head coach and this 12 as one mentality, I think that you carries over to the offensive line. I mean, obviously that is a 5-man group, and they have to work as a cohesive unit for an offensive line to be able to create any type of surge in the running game. But I just think the 12 is one kind of mentality is more than just a funny little phrase that a coach uses. You could see it. You could see it that the way that the Seahawks teammates, rallied behind Tayakata and that big interception, the way that they did the same thing with Jake Bobo and his 2 touchdown performance, a couple of weeks ago against the Kansas City Chiefs. The way that several players that basically entered preseason game number 3 against the Packers, knowing that their jobs were on the line, and then had spectacular performances. I mentioned Tayakata before, but what about the cornerback, Demarion Williams? I mean, he was all over the field. Patrick O'Connell had one of his most consistent days. I really thought that this Cody White is another one. Jacardia Wright is another one. To me, this was a demonstration, not only in preseason game 3, but all throughout training camp of underrated players kind of seizing this spotlight and proving that they deserve this opportunity. And so I think that this is one of the deeper teams that we've seen for the Seahawks in a long, long time, Corbin. And so again, it's one of the reasons why I'm as optimistic as I am. I think this is a team that is absolutely destined for double-digit victories and a return to the playoffs.
Yeah, the depth aspect. Look, I'm just going to say this right now, and I don't think that this should surprise anybody. I don't think this is a hot take. I think this is the deepest defense the Seahawks have had since the Legion of Boom era ended. I think they have done a really nice job, not just with continuity. I mean, we know how many guys are back from last year's team, but adding to that and getting to see some of these young guys. I mean, I'll mention with the D-line again. I look, when Jared Ivey went down in the first quarter, I thought, oh no. I mean, that looked bad. And then he's back out there a few plays later. And all he does is get 4 pressures. And It probably could have had a stack, but they gave it to J.R. Singleton, who, by the way, J.R. Singleton had a phenomenal game too.
Yes,
he might have been the best player on the field for either team in this game. He had a couple tackles for loss, a sack, a forced fumble where he shot into the backfield. I don't know if that's enough to get him on this team, but I think it at least puts him in the discussion point now, especially with Jonathan Hankins' health situation. So I think that you got to see the depth there. Linebacker being the only position, and even that one, I thought Jamie Sheriff did some nice things in this game. I thought Drake Thomas did some nice things in this game. I thought we got to see Jared Jackson make a few plays out there, which it's been a struggle for him up to this point. Most of the guys I just mentioned probably aren't going to be on this team, but I do feel like that is still the one position that I would say, and depth at guard too, because that'll be something we'll talk about in the later segments. But there's still some weak points here, but it does feel like depth-wise, this team is in a much better position than they have been in.
Yeah, I still have some concerns about inside linebacker and wide receiver. To me, those were positional groups that, look, if your starters stay healthy all year long, great. But we haven't seen that from Ernest Jones or Cooper Kupp specifically in the past. Obviously, you haven't seen that in the last several weeks with Tyrese Knight as well. So again, while I mentioned before, Patrick O'Connell, I thought that he had a nice performance. Drake Thomas is everywhere. He always is. Unfortunately, so many of his tackles are 3 to 4 or 5 yards downfield. And so I do think that Seattle still has a need for kind of a thumper, a traditional inside linebacker who's got a little bit more size. I was encouraged by the development of Jamie Sheriff in that role. He made some nice one-on-one open field tackles, and that's not something that you expect for a former pass rusher. Patrick O'Connell, as they mentioned in the telecast, made that same transition, but it's taken him 3 years to become a player that you feel like you're confident if he were to be asked to start that he would be able to hold his own. So is Jamie Sheriff going to be able to make that similar type of a transition? To me, that's a real question mark. And again, just the size limitations of a guy like Drake Thomas, as much as I love his kind of, rat terrier kind of playmaking style that he goes with. And at the wide receiver position, Corbin, I just still have struggles with just the lack of straight line speed and real elusiveness after the catch of Seattle's current receivers. I think that it's still a solid group. I just don't know that it's good enough at this point to be able to kind of finish the way that I think that some of the other elite teams in the NFC in particular are built to do so.
When we come back, we've got our final 53-man roster projections. On offense, we'll be looking at the O-line, the running backs, all the skill positions. When we come back, you're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and it kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. August 26th, officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer in the MVP race. Maybe you think Josh Allen's going to repeat, or you think Lamar Jackson's going to get his revenge in 2025. Crown your champion in August, whether it's an Eagles repeat, or maybe the Browns come out of nowhere behind Shedeur Sanders. Now we're getting into real fantasy. Or parlay your division winner, dark horse. Visit FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's time to dish out our final 53-man roster projections. We had one middle of last week, as we always do going into the final preseason game. Now we're already seeing some of the cuts trickle in. Of course, the Seahawks are one of the teams out there that very few names have been released, and we probably won't know till like 8 o'clock tomorrow night which players have been put on the 53 initially, and of course there'll be more moves after that. So Rob, you and I went to the task here. Let's start on offense, picking our rosters. Everything is open: trades, signing free agents, you name it, injured reserve stints. All of that is on the table here for our 53-man rosters. And so, Rob, I give you the floor here first. Who's making this football team on offense?
Well, I appreciate it, Corbin. Of course, it's a 53-man roster. I'm basically going to break up with 25 players on offense, 25 players on defense, and 3 specialists. I considered some different trade opportunities. I considered, the Dalton Reisner conversation at guard. I think that he is a candidate, but I basically wound up going with essentially the same list that I had a couple of days ago. The only exception being I am going to keep Amari Kite in this final roster projection. I just think that his size, his versatility, I think that Mike Jarrell struggled a little bit while I'm intrigued by his athleticism. I actually have both of them making the roster because talented tackles are just so rare in the NFL. And so I do think it'd be easier to slide an interior offensive lineman through the waiver process. I'm not suggesting that Christian Haynes, as a former middle round pick just a year ago, would be able to do that. But I just think that Seahawks feel like they have more talent, frankly, on the outside than they do on the inside. And so that's one of the reasons why I went with that decision. Otherwise, I have basically the names that most people would expect. At the quarterback position, the 3 guys, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, and of course Jalen Milroe. Running back, I do only have 4 total backs. That's including the fullback, Robbie Oots, as well as Kenneth Walker III, Zach Charbonnet, George Halani. I'm struggling with that decision. I definitely feel that some of the comments that Mike McDowell made about Kenneth Walker III, that you can make a strong argument that Seattle should bring in a 4th running back as well as the 5th back, the fullback again, Robbie Oots. But I didn't go in that way. Again, the biggest reason why is because I think that history has shown that you are going to be able to find some running back talent on the practice squad. I'm very excited about Jacardia Wright and Damian Martinez, but at the same time, I just think that at least one of them is going to be available to Seattle, and therefore you can get a little cute at some of the other positions. At wide receiver, I have them going with the 5 guys: Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp, Torrey Horton, Derek Young, and Jake Bobo. Not having MVS, not having Cody White kind of breaks my heart in some ways, but again, I just think that you are building your team to try to run the football, and so therefore wide receivers are not quite as prioritized. Tight end position, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, Eric Saubert. The offensive tackles, as I said, I'm bringing an extra one. Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, Josh Jones, Mike Jarrell. Josh Jones' ability to play guard to me is also important here to mention. But again, Mike Jarrell as well as Amari Kite, the undrafted free agent. Inside, I only have 5 bodies. Gray Zabel, Anthony Bradford, the rookie, Bryce Cabledew, and then, of course, Jalen Sandell and Ola Oluwatimi. That's my 25 as I see it right now, Corbin. But as I mentioned, there could be some changes along the way.
Yeah, for me, this isn't going to look that different from what I had last week, although there is one notable thing here, and I feel very strongly that this is going to happen. I think Christian Haynes, the fact that there was a pec injury for him earlier in camp, and now he's dealing with another one, maybe it's the same injury. Mike McDonald has actually not been asked about that, but this is a situation that I think you, instead of giving up on Christian Haynes, you can stash him on injured reserve, and who knows, you get somebody banged up, you bring him in, he might be a guy that after getting healthy can give you some snaps this season. But I think that he's going to start on IR. And look, this meeting has not happened yet. It has not been in the waiver or the transaction wire. Dalton Reisner has not visited the Seahawks yet, but I'm going with Dalton Reisner becoming a Seahawk, because when I look at the landscape out there, if he's looking for a starting job, maybe Cincinnati can offer him that, but I just don't know that there's a team that's going to be able to offer him better than being a swing guy at this stage. Seattle is a team that's got some coaches and some players that he has played with. So And we saw the other day, I think they do need an upgrade there at their backup guard spot. A guy that has started a lot of games at both guard positions. Dalton Reisner can do that. Really where you and I differ, offensive line construction looks a lot different because you've got obviously Amari Kite. I'm only keeping 4 tackles. I've got 8 offensive linemen or 9 offensive linemen on my thing. You've got 10. I am keeping Damian Martinez for the reason you mentioned with Ken Walker III. I don't think you can go into this season with 3 running backs. I think you're going to need a 4th one. And I don't think you're getting Damian Martinez through the waiver wire. I think somebody else is going to pick him up. The Houston Texans would be my prediction. We just saw today that they are going to be without one of their top running backs, Joe Mixon, for at least 4 weeks. So there's going to be teams looking for running backs. Damian Martinez would get plucked. So I've got him making this roster. And we are both of the same belief at receiver, but I don't know if you're cutting MVS or you're trading him. I think the Seahawks are going to find a suitor. I think they will find somebody to take him. There are too many teams out there that are looking for veteran receivers right now. Everybody's talking Adam Thielen going back to Minnesota. I would not count out the Minnesota Vikings pulling this trade off because Marquez Valdes-Scantling has done well in Clint Kubiak's scheme. I think he would do well in Kevin O'Connell's scheme, and they need help there. So that is the prediction I'm making right now. Minnesota trades for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Seattle gets a conditional late-round pick in return, and they move forward with Derek Young and Jake Bobo as their 4 and 5 receivers. When we come back, hey, we've got defense to talk about, Rob. That might be where there's a little bit more drama, actually, when we're looking at who's going to be making this roster. We'll get to our final projections on that side of the football coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you, our valued listeners. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and what makes your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping out. This episode is brought your way by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. And our Locked On League's been running through Yahoo for a while now because of its easy setup, great mobile app, and the smack talk just hitting different on the message boards. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. To kick things off, they've introduced killer Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues on Yahoo. Lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give the new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football right now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith, glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. 53-man roster cutdown day coming tomorrow. Every team has to be down to 53 players by 1 p.m. Pacific time. That includes you, Seattle, so start reporting some of those, please. Anyway, again, we probably won't know all the cuts till like late tomorrow night because that's the way that John Schneider and the Seahawks do. They are really good at keeping things under wraps. But regardless, let's talk 53-man roster projections, our final ones. We just did offense. Now we're going to shift gears to the defensive side of the ball. And Rob, there's more drama in terms of defensive players and injuries that I think could make this a really difficult side of the ball to figure out who all exactly is going to be on the roster. Now, there is a little bit more clarity The one today that was pretty eye-opening to me was the update on Jonathan Hankins. He hasn't even started intensive workouts to get ready to play football. Like, that does not sound like a guy that's going to be playing anytime soon to me. He's on the NFI list, so I know you and I are in agreement. We've both got him staying on the NFI, and who knows when he's going to be available coming back from that back issue. But I would be stunned if he is playing earlier than week 5 with what we heard from Mike Macdonald today.
Yeah, there's just so many acronyms now that the NFL uses to kind of squeeze players onto their rosters and steal good players from, I don't know, leagues like the Canadian Football League, that it kind of makes me laugh sometimes, because we are talking about a 53-man roster here. Obviously, there's going to be the 15 practice squad players as well, an extra player if they want to use the international pathway program, as well as I expect that the Seahawks will, probably with Federico Merengues, the center, so it is kind of a funny, time of year. And I do think that the Seahawks, frankly, if the NFL allows it, then I think that they get kind of screwed over a little bit when it comes to just the geographic aspect of it, all the travel and everything. So if they are allowed to release their, the players a little bit later than other teams, then I think that they should continue to do that, frankly. It gives them a little bit of an advantage when all these other NFL teams are putting out their list. But all of that said, Corbin, going back to what we're here to discuss is, of course, the initial 25 that I have on Seattle's 53-man roster for defense. And again, it's very similar to the one that I put out there a couple of days ago. The only difference is I have the rookie edge rusher, Connor O'Toole, narrowly making it over the fourth-year player, Tyreek Smith, another edge rusher, of course. And the fact that Tyreek Smith has struggled with injuries a little bit over his career, got injured and then came back. Certainly kudos to the toughness that he demonstrated against the Packers. Frankly, I think Tyreek Smith has been the more impressive football player throughout the preseason and training camp than Connor O'Toole. I just don't think that you're going to be able to get Connor O'Toole through the waiver process as easily as you might with Tyreek Smith. You may lose Tyreek Smith as well. I think you're going to be more angry, the Seahawks as an organization, if they lose Connor O'Toole, who they gave more money than anybody else as an undrafted free agent. I think that he is showing a more well-rounded game than Tyreek Smith showed during his first year in the NFL. So that's really what it comes down to. Otherwise, I have them going with the 5 edge rushers, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, DeMarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu, and the aforementioned Connor O'Toole. 4 defensive linemen, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Mike Morris, Jared Ivey, the undrafted free agent who we've been gushing about throughout this entire training camp process. It is interesting with Mike Morris that there's some reports of a concussion, and so he could be another one of those players, as we talked about, Corbin, that could start the season on the on the IR, or again another one of those situations in which the NFL is allowed to kind of keep players on their roster. So I think that that's a possibility. The Mike Morris storyline is an interesting one. But nose tackle, I have Jaron Reed, Quentin Bohanna, inside linebacker, Ernest Jones IV, Tyrese Knight, Drake Thomas, Patrick O'Connell. Obviously, Tyrese Knight's health being a factor here as well. At cornerback, I only have the 5 names. 5 names: Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Josh Jobe, Nehemiah Pritchett, and Shaq Griffin. I'm really struggling with not having Demarion Williams on there, as we talked about. I thought that he was one of the splashier players in that preseason game 3. At safety, I have Julian Love, Nicky Minwari, Kobe Bryant, DeAnthony Bell, and Ty Okada. And it's the combination of both Bell and Okada, again, is another spot where I'm struggling with a little bit, but I just think that the versatility that Seattle's expecting from their safeties is going to allow them, or basically require them, to have an extra safety, one more than most other NFL teams will have.
I'm glad you pointed out the Mike Morris situation, because I think there's a couple guys, Christian Haynes I talked about on offense. I have him in my projection starting an injured reserve, which means he's going to be on the roster to kick off the process, because if you put him on IR before that, he's done for the entire season. So there will be a few guys that I have on my roster that look, Dalton Reisner's not on the roster right now. So you technically could have Christian Haynes tomorrow, and then the next day you could put him on IR, and then you could sign Dalton Reisner. So that's how this process would work. But on defense, Mike Morris is somebody that I'm keeping an eye on, because it didn't look, I'm reading body language and just the way that Mike Macdonald reacted. And it could have been a simple stance where he just didn't know an update on Mike Morris. But this happened last week in the joint practice, and he had to turn and ask the PR director, like, what's the status on him? Like, it seemed kind of ominous to me. Whereas Jake Bobo, we already know it's a concussion and he's in good spirits, he's in the program. And Mike Morris has got a concussion. He's saying, well, we'll see where he's at next week. So that made it sound to me like maybe this is a more significant concussion. Like there are different levels of severity with concussions.
Sure.
So I think that's something to watch. And so that's why I wanted to make sure to put a little bit of clarity there, because I have Mike Morris starting on injured reserve to begin the season. And there's a certain player the Seahawks are going to be adding. It's just like with Dalton Reisner here. I've been saying this since he was cut after the draft. I still believe Jadeveon Clowney will be a Seattle Seahawk. And I just look at the fact that I don't care what kind of progress Uchenna Nwosu has made up to this point. I hope that he can play in week 1 or in week 2. But you have got to have 5 really solid edges in Mike McDonald's defense. And you've got cap space. You have the need for another guy that can set the edge hard against the run. Jadeveon Clowney can move around a little bit. Like, this screams perfect match for both sides. Clowney didn't have to come to training camp. Now he can come in and he can play for somebody. Amari Cooper did it as the Raiders today. Like, there's going to be vets that just didn't want to play in training camp that are going to sign. I think Clowney comes to Seattle, and I've been calling that for a while. I'm sticking with it. So that's the spot that's going to be opened up with Mike Morris going on injured reserve. Hankins staying on the non-football injury list, as is Riley Mills. Hopefully you can get him back by middle of the season at some point. And you and I are in agreement on pretty much everything else. I've got the same corners. That one I was not as torn as what you are with Demarion Williams. I think Williams is a guy you can get back on your practice squad. So I'm not worried about that. Shamar Jean-Charles, I have him getting cut at this point. And maybe he's an IR guy if he is not fully recovered. That is a possibility. But he's missed almost the entire August and July time period. I don't see any place for him on the roster. Okada making it this time just because, look, when you make an interception like that, and what he's done in specialty. And, oh, by the way, he had a really nice tackle on Josh Jacobs on the one play that Josh Jacobs played in this game to open the game. I think Ty Okada is kind of I loved it. We talked about this in the Seahawks squad show after the game the other day. He's kind of the defensive version of Jake Bobo in the sense that he's kind of that energizer glue guy type that the coaching staff loves, teammates love. And I just think he's a really good special teams guy too. So I've got him and DeAnthony Bell both making this roster. It is arguably the strongest position group that they have on this team. So there's no problem keeping 5 guys there, in my opinion. So you and I are in agreement on most of these. As for special teams, look, I still think Chris Stahl is going to be ready. You've got Brady Russell still listed as your long snapper here, but I think Chris Stahl will be ready for week 1 based on what I have heard from a few people in the building. So I think you will have your trifecta with Mike Dixon and Jason Myers and Chris Stahl ready. If not, you had another long snapper that has been in camp with you. You can sign him to the practice squad and then elevate him. He's not going to be plucked. They're not going to be having long snappers plucked off the waiver wire. So you can bring in somebody if you need to, if Chris Stahl's not ready.
Yeah, if Chris Stahl's not ready, again, I think that Brady Russell can play that role effectively for you. If Chris Stahl is ready, then he's the guy. And Brady Russell, to me, just screams the kind of a guy that isn't likely to get picked up by some other team as a veteran and a fairly limited kind of a player, although one who's very, very valuable just with his versatility and his reliability. But again, I don't worry about losing him. Chris Stahl, on the other hand, if he is healthy, again, this is he was the best long snapper in college football a couple of years ago. I haven't seen him make an errant snap in the NFL in his first year in the league. So, yeah, exactly. So to me, that is an important position to at least acknowledge. And then obviously Jason Myers and Michael Dixon. I don't know if there is a better group of kickers in all of the NFL.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, hopefully we will have a really good idea of what the true 53-man roster looks like. We'll dive into surprises, trades. Are there any rumors that are still circulating? I wouldn't get excited about Micah Parsons, but who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But we will have everything you need here on Cutdown Day on Locked On Seahawks. So make sure that you tune in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.
you.